So I found that one of the things that starting out DMs and stuff, and players as well, kind of struggle with in terms of D&D is figuring out how to describe things. As a player, you might want to describe actions that your character takes, ways that they do things, and ways that you perhaps convey emotion, because contrary to popular Critical Role belief, you do not have to say every word in character that comes out of your character's mouth. If you want a good example of role-playing through description, I think that it would be an excellent thing to go and check out any time that Patrick Rothfuss plays, who plays a character in Acquisitions Incorporated that is very fun and a delight, even though he doesn't particularly talk in character much. Most of his character moments are from badass things that he does, not says, which is, honestly, I think if you're jumping into D&D and you don't have personal experience in that sort of sphere of perhaps playing a character, I think simply describing how you as a player kind of do your own thing, and you, instead of, if your DM asks you, how do you convince the local lords to assist you, and you go, I don't know, then you're not a bad player for it. You just simply don't know what you might say. But your character, depending on how charismatic they may be, might know. So you could perhaps make a case for that. If you feel like your character is unable to... No, if you feel like you, personally, are unable to convey some level of things through talking as a character, then definitely just say to your DM, I don't know, but my character probably does. Maybe I'll say something that perhaps is favorable, perhaps something referring to his past that I might know about. And if your DM then proceeds to go, no, what do you say? Then they're bad. They're not bad. They're just don't really know how you work. But yeah, if you want to describe stuff, I'm here for you. Maybe. I have a couple tips. I'm not exactly an expert on this because I'm mostly like an improv describer. I usually don't write things before I say them, or normally don't even think before I say some of the things that I put into my D&D games, which is frankly made for some very funny and cool moments and some interesting plot points that I never expected to be like proper things that just kind of, you know, came out of my mouth randomly and boom, there it is. Like, there was an entire plot line in my thing where I just accidentally made it so that there was this very important political meeting going on that the party had to go to involving nobles and stuff, and I didn't even come up with half of the people that were in there, so I just made them all up. Describing things, whether you've planned them or not, can be difficult. If you are sitting down making a dungeon and you want to describe a room, then it might be difficult to figure out how to do so. And I think that a good way to do it, we'll go over an improv style that you can go for, but first I'm going to talk to you about a way that you can write it down. I've been constructing a dungeon for weeks now that is spanning multiple levels that I'm quite proud of how it's going so far. And the way that I formatted it is, it's the Magical Tea Party method of writing a dungeon, which it's not, it's just how I do it. Where basically, I don't write these lavish descriptions. I instead have a few bullet points on interesting features of the room that the party need to be aware of. I don't particularly try and describe the particular material of anything. I simply state, there is a cupboard here, and it is open, or it is shut. There is a set of drawers here. One of them are open, or two of them are open. There is a chandelier hanging from the roof and it appears to be lit. That's as far as I go normally, unless I want to convey a very specific thing. If I want to perhaps let the party know that there are intricate carvings depicting some ancient war that happened eons ago that has impacted the scarred land of this world to this day, I can do that. But I feel like your party doesn't want to know that. They would rather hear, or at least my groups would rather hear, there's some carvings on the wall showing a war. And from there, if that's all you've written and your players ask for more, if you're decent at improv, you can fill out the blanks and try and come up with some other stuff. But if you feel like you aren't, then just simply say, I'm not entirely sure, but it doesn't have significance. And you might think, whoa, hey, whoa, wait a minute. I'm telling people that my object in the room has no significance? Yes, because if your party doesn't know that, they're going to spend ages on it and you're going to be bored as hell and they're going to be bored as hell. I feel like some people have like an a genuine problem. Like, if you're planning a room or something and you describe the tapestry, they're going to look at it for 45 minutes and think that's important when you just thought it was pretty. And I have no problem literally saying to the party, this is not important. This is just cool dungeon dressing. And if you feel like that's something that you want to do, then you can go for it. If you don't, that's fine, you don't have to say that. But describing things can sometimes be the bane of the DM's existence if you accidentally slip up in terms of making one thing look too significant and one thing look insignificant, when in fact you really should have swapped around which you prioritized. And it can be difficult to do that sometimes, so I think a way of making your party focus on something in an area that you really want them to is always describing it last. Because the thing that they hear the most recently is what they're going to commit to memory the best. Not saying that they're not going to, like, you know, if they're decent players, they should hopefully be taking rudimentary notes, or at least trying to pay attention to every detail of the room that you're describing to them so that they can make acute decisions and stuff like that. But generally, the last thing that you mention is the highlight, if you will. And I tend to make it a point of, if they're in a larger setting, so if they're going into a house or something, I make it a point to describe a few small little things in the area, if you will. So like, if the party enters a random house that they intend to perhaps rob or something, I'll point out a couple of things that they might want to take, and I'll also point out a couple of things that they would particularly notice, perhaps a family painting, or maybe a dog bed or something like that, so to emphasize to them there is a family that lives here, here is some information about them, and that there is also likely a dog. And the dog's bed's pretty big, so if you make a loud noise, there might be a dog coming rushing for you, and they're gonna bite your face off. I don't know. That's fun. But yeah, as a DM, I think finding your focus to talk about is difficult, because sometimes your players will never pick up on what you wanted to tell them, whether it be in how an NPC acts or how a room or environment is shown to them. They're not always going to pick up on every minor clue that you want to give them, and I don't think it's your responsibility to give them those clues unless they need them, or unless there is no way that their characters would not pick up on it. For instance, if all of their characters are 15+ intelligence, but they cannot figure out the significance of a certain object in a room, allow one or two of them an intelligence check to perhaps determine some of the nature of it, so that you're not sat there for half an hour questioning stuff. And when you kind of take time to describe an object, if you over-describe, it makes it even harder to comprehend. So for example, if you talk about this overly complex set of drawers that has a million different compartments and describe the colors of each, and then just nope out and just be like, all right, solve it, your players are going to forget everything. If you have like a puzzle layout or something, so like there are 5 colored buttons on the wall in this order, slow down and say there are 5 colored buttons in this order. Get notes out, you might forget. I don't want to describe it again. Red, yellow, blue, and then just keep going until you've got them all, and from there, if the players still have to ask you like, what order were they in again? Smack them in the face and tell them they're dumb. Don't do that, but you know, they deserve it. But yeah, and we'll move on to kind of how to do it more improv style, because I feel like improv can be quite difficult for some people. It hasn't been for me personally, but I know plenty of people that definitely struggle with improv. So for instance, my mate Ash isn't exactly fully a improv DM, although she's had some great improv moments. She primarily has run modules so far, and they've been very reliable for her, and that's absolutely fine. You do not have to be good at improv whatsoever if you're a DM, and it is absolutely fine if you don't have enough written down and a player asks something that you didn't realize. You can literally say, that's not important, or I don't know and I haven't written it down, sorry. And granted, if you feel like there's something that in this particular area that they're in is entirely missing, and you feel like the party have entered only to leave, then it's going to be a bit of a gut punch to them, and they feel like they aren't making progress as much. So if you want to add something else, here are a couple recommendations. A random creature walks in and does any number of things, antagonizes, attacks full on, immediately flees, makes peace, negotiates, sells, All of these things that you can just suddenly throw, you could have a random person walk in and make the room feel more significant than you'd originally wrote it. If you're not that good of in improv and you'd wrote a mostly empty room with a couple of finer details that your party's getting quite stuck on, one of the ways of dealing with that is therefore sending in someone that can fill in some of the blanks that you feel like you forgot to put in. Because when you're playing a character, I feel like as a DM, it might put some more pressure on you to kind of come up with more reasons for things around you and build on the scenario more without you fully putting it in your head beforehand. But something that I like to do with things like dungeons and then also locations is, if you're not good at improv, this is great stuff to perhaps add, is just have a bunch of stuff ready for the party to encounter. If you feel like they've gone through the third room and found little to nothing, an ochre jelly comes out of the corner. If you feel like in their little chase that they've been having has been going on for 10 minutes and they've got nowhere near, something else jumps out from the other side and now they're being chased. You know what I mean? And you can have all of these things just ready to go. It might take some more planning, but if you simply take the time to perhaps come up with, you know, a few creatures or people that might be in a setting or an area that might be doing something that perhaps motivates the party to be distracted from the scenario that you'd accidentally done nothing with and stuff like that. Because part of describing things is undescribing things. And I'll tell you that for certain, because when you're a DM and you describe something, that's not sacred. That might change accidentally. Or because you misread something in a module, so be ready to change that, just the same as maybe be ready to shift up the pacing of a scenario and change something else that's going on around them. And yeah, just go wild, because sometimes you fail at describing and it sucks. If you want to improvise a more detailed explanation of a location, consider some key factors. And the DMG has a great small section on various things that a room might contain or an atmosphere might contain, and how you can flavor an area to make a party feel more immersed. If you feel like there's a particular smell, perhaps try and think of one that you could maybe reason that they might be around. Perhaps the general area smells a bit more like gas, and that's due to the next room further on that you're also making up, in fact, being a room that has a gas build-up. And if the party open it and they have a torch up, it blows up. Something random like that. And every single sense, I find, can push further into coming up with more detailed and interesting areas of a dungeon. If one area is particularly more dark than the rest, not only due to the fact that you're in a dungeon and there's not much light, but also the fact that it seems that the walls are absorbing a lot of the light. You've just said that. Okay, why is it doing that? The party wants to know. The walls are magic and they're absorbing some of the light in, and if you're not careful it'll keep absorbing the light and then you won't have any, and then you'll have to relight your torches and stuff. It's that sort of stuff that can randomly come up but make for interesting tiny menial challenges. So we've done sight and we've done smell. What about hearing? There's a faint banging sound coming from underneath the stone floor somehow. If a character presses their ear up to it, it almost feels like, you know, when you've got like your ear on a desk and then someone next to you is smacking it with a pencil or something and it's like incredibly loud, something like that. And you realize that way further on into the room beyond your vision or something, there's like a and you're just like, what's causing it? Oh, there's a dwarf at an anvil, and he's like, what are you doing here? So we've done hearing, smell, sight, taste. You walk into a room and it tastes like strawberries. Why does it taste like strawberries? It's because someone put a magical enchantment in the room to make it taste like strawberries, and if you lick the wall, you basically get like a day of rations worth of strawberries. And all this stuff sounds stupid, but that's going to make for tiny little memorable moments in your game. All of this sort of random stuff that I'm coming up with sounds stupid, but I genuinely feel like my players would like it. and it would create for interesting scenarios where it might make them just go like, oh, which is a very good reaction for your party to have, I think. And again, you might think I'm really weird for coming up with all these random things, but if you want to do like if you've got a session coming up in 10 minutes and you didn't plan that dungeon, make it up and come up and just think of the senses and just think what sense, okay, what thing is happening. And granted, if you keep doing this for an entire session, you might fall over your words, or you might accidentally do something very similar to a room previous. That's fine. And if you feel like you've done that, your players, again, they might get slightly bored of the repetition, but they won't like hold a grudge on you if there's another room that sucks up the light. Because if you do that twice, that's now a plot hook, right? It's happened more than once. There's someone going around planting these spells in these rooms that's sucking light from the places. Maybe it's a drow faction that's perhaps trying to work their way through this massive dungeon and slowly make it so that intruding adventurers and stuff like that would rely on their light sources aren't going to fare so well, so that them, with their extremely acute dark vision, can now set up bases. For reference, I don't plan these videos. I swear, this all just randomly came from my head. And granted, it could be extremely difficult for you to do that as a DM, and if you feel like you can't really do that, or at least you feel like you wouldn't be comfortable doing it, then most certainly plan ahead and use some of the advice from earlier if you feel like you do much better without improv. But if you need a dungeon in a minute, then again, consider the senses and what they might lead to. I've created a really cool faction to put in my my dungeon now, and a bunch of room ideas just by rattling them off to you guys. This is one of the reasons I love this channel. You've given me so much dungeon material. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful to you. This might have been a bit of a longer one, I feel. Like I've been talking for quite a while, but if you like that, I guess you can like and subscribe and stuff for more of this. We do all sorts of weird videos here and just random stuff. We have a podcast every week as well. And if you want to talk about random stuff, then you can join the Discord, which is in the description. And you can also comment down below and talk to me there about any other tips that you might have for other people, or perhaps additional questions for more specific stuff that I perhaps didn't answer here. But yeah, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and see ya. I'm using what I basically, it's the Jake, it's the T&D, it's